Good evening, and welcome to the Joe Hill Roadshow. My name is Michael. This is my wonderful partner, Nell. And we're going to be telling stories tonight and singing songs from a certain period of history and also showing some pictures. We'll be using these images to enhance the storytelling. And I believe Nell would like to say a few words.
Yeah, I just want to say when we usually do this show, we do it in an auditorium full of people, live bodies, you know, but unfortunately because of the situation that we're in right now, we can't do the show in that way. Now, we were supposed to do it at the Dark Horse Theater here in Nashville, but we couldn't do that. So, we're doing it like this tonight. So when we have a room full of people, we ask folks to sing along with us in a lot of these songs. So tonight we're going to be putting the lyrics up on the screen of some of these songs. And if you're in the mood and you feel like it, please sing along with us. Also, we do have a PayPal link that you can make a donation if you would like. If you'd like to support this effort, you know, throw us a few bucks, maybe what you would have paid if you had an opportunity to come see us live in a theater. And so without further ado, here is Michael.
So we're going to be talking about early labor history tonight. And in particular, a group called the Industrial Workers of the World, the IWW, or the Wobblies as they were known. They were a major force for workers' rights and workers' dignity in the years between 1905 and around 1917. We're also going to be talking about Joe Hill, their most famous songwriter. Now, the Wobblies sang all the time. They sang on the job, they sang in meetings, they sang on picket lines, and they sang when they were thrown in jail, which was quite often. So we're going to start our program off tonight with an IWW song that was actually written in 1947. It was not a song from Joe Hill's time, but I believe it will get us into the spirit of what we'll be talking about. It's called Put It on the Ground, and the meaning of that will become quite clear quite early in the song. We will go over the chorus. Oh, put it on the ground, spread it all around, dig it with a hoe, it will make your flowers grow. If you want a raise in pay, here's all you have to do. Go and ask your boss for it and he will give it to you. He will give it to you, my friend, yes, he will give it to you. A raise in pay without delay, yes, he will give it to you. Oh, put it on the ground, spread it all around, dig it with a hoe, it will make your flowers grow. Get it? To those who run the industries, I'm shedding bitter tears. They haven't made a single dime in over 30 years. In over 30 years, my friend, in over 30 years. Not one thin dime in all that time, in over 30 years. Oh, put it on the ground, spread it all around, dig it with a hoe, it will make your flowers grow. And my favorite, we like to work on holidays, and when the day is done, why should they pay us overtime for having so much fun? For having so much fun, my friend, for having so much fun. Pay overtime would be a crime for having so much fun. Oh, put it on the ground, spread it all around, dig it with a hoe, it will make your flowers grow.
Okay. So, who was Joe Hill anyway? He's probably best known because of the song I Dreamed I Saw Joe Hill Last Night, which was sung by Joan Baez at the Woodstock Festival in 1969. Now, some people think Joe Hill is a mythological character like Paul Bunyan, but he's not. He was a real guy. He was a Swedish immigrant who migrated to this country in 1902. He was a manual laborer with a flair for writing music and lyrics, and he wrote many classic wobbly songs, some of which we're going to be singing for you tonight. Now, he is considered the precursor of Woody Guthrie, Bob Dylan, Rage Against the Machine, Annie DeFranco, Billy Bragg, Bruce Springsteen, all those people who sing songs of social significance. Now, folk singer John McCutcheon says, Joe Hill's songs are a 100-year-old version of what is happening today. Joe Hill was killed in 1915, and we're going to go into a lot more information about that. In 2015, on the 100th anniversary of his death, there were 40 concerts that were held all over the country celebrating his life and his legacy. We organized the show here in Nashville and also played at the show in Knoxville, and frankly, that's how we got into doing this show.
So the Wobblies wanted to see radical change in the capitalist system through industrial unionism. In contrast to the IWW, the AFL, the American Federation of Labor, was organizing separate craft unions, which gave management room to play one union off against the other in negotiations. The IWW's idea was to organize all the workers in an industry, such as the steel industry, into one union, so that when one group went on strike, all the other groups would strike in solidarity. The general strike, where workers across all industries walked off their jobs together, was another Wobbly tactic. A popular Wobbly slogan was, "An injury to one is an injury to all." This is a photo that was taken in Winnipeg at the 1919 general strike, and that's a man by the name of Roger Bray, one of the leaders of the strike, addressing a quite large crowd in Victoria Park. In fact, 30,000 people walked off their jobs in Winnipeg, public and private employees. It was the largest strike in Canadian history. And it was organized partially by a group called the One Big Union, OBU, and they were affiliates of the Industrial Workers of the World.
And we had the pleasure of being invited to Winnipeg in 2019 to play 2 Joe Hill shows in celebration of this historic 1919 general strike. So in order to maximize the power and self-determination of working people, the IWW wanted to organize all the workers of the world into one big union. Joe Hill wrote a song about it. He called it "What We Want." We want the guy that dives for pearls, the pretty maid that's making curls, and the baker and the staker and the chimney sweep. We want the man that's slinging hash, the kid that works for a little cash in one union brand. Come all ye toilers who work for wages, come from every land, join the fighting band in one union brand, and for the workers will make upon this earth a paradise when slaves get wise and organized. Well, we need to understand Joe Hill and the industrial workers of the world within the context of the early labor movement. At the dawn of the 20th century, capitalism was new, it was raw, and it was brutal. We are talking about long hours, sweatshops, terrible working conditions, polluted air, and buildings where workers were injured and sometimes even killed. In 1911, a fire broke out in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory and quickly spread to the 8th, 9th, and 10th floors, too high for the fire ladders to reach. Now, the law said the doors were supposed to open out, but at the Triangle Factory, they opened in and they were locked so that the company could keep track of its employees. Trapped young women were burned to death at their work tables, jammed against exit doors, or leapt to their death down elevator shafts or out windows. 146 people died in this tragedy, most of them young immigrant women. This was the worst disaster in New York City until 9/11.
IWW members were often attacked. A couple of examples of this. In 1916, in Everett, Washington, a boatload of Wobblies was fired on by a group of 200 vigilantes who were gathered by the sheriff. Now, that's the law. 5 were shot to death. 31 were wounded, and it was a sea of blood with bodies floating. Terrible, terrible scene. Another example, in 1917, in Butte, Montana, fearless organizer Frank Little was dragged from his house, tortured, and hanged. His body was left dangling from a railroad trestle, and no one was ever charged with his murder. A woodblock poster that came out after Frank's death read, "No war but class war, slain by capitalist interests for organizing and inspiring his fellow workers." Now, the early 20th century was the era of the infamous robber barons. The wealth of men like John D. Rockefeller and J.P. Morgan was built on the backs of men and women who worked in grueling and often unsafe conditions for poverty wages. Now, this is a satirical cartoon who showed up in 1883. Now, this is prior to the industrial workers of the world time. And in fact, this is the era of a group called the Knights of Labor, who were precursors to the IWW. And it's entitled "The Protectors of Our Industries," and it's actually ridiculing the idea that the industrial magnates of the day, the Vanderbilts, the Goulds, the Mellons, etc., were actually protecting the industries by picturing them as bloated parasites, sucking up their bags of millions of dollars of cash, while the working people are holding up the boat. And they're working for $12 a week, $9 a week, $7 a week. A federal study in 1915 found that 1/3 to 1/2 of the population of these United States were living at near starvation level.
So we're going to do a song for you now that we call it an aspirational song. In this song, 16 million people go out on a general strike, and they win the 4-hour day with no wage cut. Sounds pretty good. 4-hour day, no wage cut. Well, why did they want that? They wanted that because that way there would be no unemployment. Everyone would be put to work. And in the last verse of the song, things get even better because the workers have seized the factories and they own the means of production. So we invite you to sing along with us on this song. This is a Joe Hill song, and it's called "It's a Long Way Down to the Soup Line." Let's go over the chorus. Michael?
All right. It's a long way down to the soup line. It's a long way to go. It's a long way down to the soup line, and the soup is thin, I know. It's goodbye to good old pork That's a good one. So we're going to start that song as we always start our songs, with the first verse. Bill Brown was just a working man like others of his kind. He lost his job and tramped the streets when work was hard to find. The landlord put him on the step, the bankers kept his dough. And Bill heard everybody sing no matter where he'd go. It's a long way down to the soup line. It's a long way to go. It's a long way down to the soup line, and the soup is thin, I know. It's goodbye to good old pork chops, farewell to beefsteak rare. Oh, it's a long, long way down to the soup line, but my soup is there. So Bill and 16 million more responded to the call to force the hours of labor down and must make jobs for all. They picketed the industries and won the 4-hour day and organized a general strike so folks won't have to say it's a long way down to the soup line. It's a long way to go. It's a long way down to the soup line, and the soup is thin, I know. It's goodbye to good old pork chops, farewell to beefsteak rare. Oh, it's a long, long way down to the soup line, but my soup is there. Fiddle! With hungry unemployed, they all own homes, they're living well, they're happy, free and strong. The billionaires wear prison suits and sing this little song. It's a long way down to the soup line. It's a long way to go. It's a long way down to the soup line, and the soup is thin, I know. It's goodbye to good old pork chops, farewell to beefsteak rare. Oh, it's a long, long way down to the soup line, but my soup is there. Yes, it's a long, long way down to the soup line, but my soup is there.
Okay, all right, that's always a fun song.
That's a good one.
That's a good one for us to sing.
Goodbye, pork chops.
Good old pork chops, I love that line. So, the beginning of the 20th century saw a dramatic increase in the number of immigrants coming to this country. So they had an immigration issue back then, just like we do now. In the first decade of the century, 9 million people came to this United States, all of them looking for a better life in the so-called Promised Land. Now, many of these immigrants worked at the toughest and lowest paying jobs. Unions were growing during this time, but 80% of union members belonged to the American Federation of Labor, the AFL. Now, the AFL wanted to improve conditions for some workers, but it left out most workers. At this point in its history, the AFL was almost all male, almost all white, and almost all skilled workers. Women were growing in the workforce at this point, but only 1% of women belonged to a union, and black workers, who in 1910 made 1/3 the wages of white workers, were excluded from most AFL unions. In the meantime, the industrial workers of the world welcomed all workers.
The terrible conditions of labor and the exclusivity in union organizing led to the formation of the Industrial Workers of the World in Chicago in June of 1905. Its purpose was, and I quote, "the emancipation of the working class from the slave bondage of capitalism."
Woo!
Whoa,
How's that for a goal?
That's a goal for you. So the Wobblies, common laboring people, united in their militant response to the horrible conditions of most workers. They taught the gospel of social revolution and nonviolent resistance. They wanted a workers' democracy. The IWW concentrated on organizing workers that the AFL considered unorganizable or undesirable. Immigrants, the unskilled, people of color, and migratory workers. As Big Bill Haywood put it at the founding convention, "We're going down into the gutter to get at the mass of workers and bring them up to a decent plane of living." Now here's a Big Bill Haywood quote that we love, and it says, "If one man has a dollar he didn't work for, some other man worked for a dollar he didn't get."
And here is another wobbly poster that we're real fond of too, that's still relevant today. It says, "Migrants aren't pushing down wages, it's your boss."
And we all know who we're talking about, don't we?
We sure do. So, in 1912, Joe Hill went to the Fraser River Valley where 8,000 railroad workers were on strike on the Canadian Northern Railway. They went on strike because of low wages, long hours, bad food, dangerous conditions on the job sites, and crowded three-tier bunks where they had to live that had no windows, dirt floors, and no toilets. Some workers lost arms and legs in preventable accidents. So Joe wrote this beautiful song to an old Irish melody, and it is called "Where the Fraser River Flows," and it goes like this.
Fellow workers, pay attention to what I'm going to mention, for it is the clear contention of the workers of the world. We should all be steady, true-hearted, brave, and ready to rally round our standard when the Union flag's unfurled. Where the Fraser River flows, every fellow worker knows they have bullied and oppressed us, but still our Union grows. And we're going to find a way, boys, shorter hours and better pay, boys. We're going to win the day, boys, where the Fraser River flows. Down on all the boss is stretching, scabs and goons he's fetching, and they are a sad collection, as Jesus only knows. Why their mothers reared them, why the devil spared them, these are questions I can't answer. Where the Fraser River flows, where the Fraser River flows, every fellow worker knows they our union grows. And we're going to find a way, boys. Shorter hours and better pay, boys. We're going to win the day, boys, where the Fraser River flows. Yes, we're going to win the day, boys, where the Fraser River flows.
So, the Wobbies were prolific writers. They had turned out dozens of periodicals and propaganda pamphlets. However, it was their songs of hope, unity, and humor, spun out of frustration at life's injustices, that resonated with the masses. As Joe Hill said in a letter from jail,
"A pamphlet, no matter how good, is read only once, but a song is learned by heart and repeated over and over. I maintain that if a person can take a few cold common sense facts, put them into a song, and dress them up in a cloak of humor to take the dryness off them, he will succeed in reaching a great number of workers who are unwilling to read a pamphlet or an editorial on economic science."
So up there on the screen now is the famous wobbly Little Red Songbook. They sold thousands of copies of this songbook for 10 cents. Now Joe Hill, like Woody Guthrie, even Bob Dylan in his early days, wrote many songs to melodies that people were already familiar with. So then when it came time to sing, every wobbly had his Little Red Songbook and he would pull it out and he would have the lyrics in front of him. So it made it easy for people to sing along on these songs. Now city councils in Spokane, Washington, San Diego, Fresno, California, and other cities passed ordinances banning soapboxers.
Okay, this phrase soapbox and soapboxer refers to a practice that went on back in those days way before there was the mass communications that we're familiar with now. And what they would do, they would take a wooden box and set it down on a street corner, for instance, and step up on it to raise their head, to give them a little elevation, and address a crowd. They would gather a crowd around them and they would speak, they would propagandize, they would recruit, they would preach. And the Wobblies used this method to recruit members to their cause.
So, of course, the Wobblies defied these ordinances banning soapboxers. They would go out and soapbox anyway, and then they would get arrested and they would get thrown in jail. And then they would send out a call all across the country for Wobblies to hop a freight train, come to town, soapbox, get arrested, and jam the jails. Mm-hmm. Now here is one of my favorite pictures. It's a picture of a woman soapboxer. I don't think there were very many of them, but there she is, up on the soapbox, all surrounded by men. The San Diego chief of police in 1912 said,
"I cannot punish them. Listen to them singing. They are singing all the time and yelling and hollering and telling the jailers to quit work and join the union."
Now the Salvation Army was also often down on Skid Row recruiting. And it would use its brass band to try to drown out the wobbly soapboxers.
So, as a response and a challenge, Joe Hill wrote his most famous song, "The Preacher and the Slave," using the melody to the old Salvation Army hymn in the sweet by and by. He refers to the Salvation Army in this song as the Starvation Army. And this, by the way, is where the term pie in the sky originated. Joe Hill invented it.
So we want to invite you to sing along in this song. This is probably Joe Hill's most famous song. I know with our CD, this is the song that gets played the most and is the most requested.
Yep.
So we're going to do it like this. Everybody's going to sing the first two choruses. The third chorus, Michael and I will sing by ourselves because it has some different lyrics, and then we'll all come back in really big time on the last chorus. So, shall we go over the chorus, Michael?
Let's do it.
Okay.
You will eat by and by in that glorious land above the sky. Work and pray, live on hay,
live on hay.
You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie.
Yeah.
All right.
The chorus.
Here we go. Long-haired preachers come out every night, trying to tell you what's wrong and what's right. But when asked about something to eat, they will answer with voices so sweet. You will eat by and by in that glorious land above the sky. Work and pray, live on hay.
Live on hay.
You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie. Oh, the Starvation Army they play. They sing and they clap and they pray till they get all your coin out the drum. And they'll tell you that you're on the bump. You will eat by and by in that glorious land above the sky. Work and pray, live on hay.
Live on hay.
You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie. Working folks of all countries unite. Side by side, for freedom we will fight. And the world and its wealth we have gained. To the 1% we'll sing this refrain. You will eat by and by when you've learned how to cook and how to fry. Chop some wood, it'll do you good. Then you'll eat in the sweet by and by. Alright, here we go. Woo! You will eat by and by in that glorious land above the sky. Work and pray, live on hay.
Live on hay.
You'll get pie in the sky when you die. That's a lie.
All right. Okay. Well, that's always a fun song to sing.
Mm-hmm.
So the next song we're going to do for you is another famous Joe Hill song, and it is called "The Rebel Girl." And I'm going to right now send it out to all you rebel girls who are out there watching this video, because you would not be watching this if you were not a rebel girl.
And of course, I am sending this out to my rebel girl right here. She is one of the originals, I'll tell you.
So this song was written about Elizabeth Gurley Flynn, and she gave her first wobbly speech at age 15 in 1906 and went to jail many times for the wobblies. And she was one of the leaders of the famous Bread and Roses strike in Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1912, where 10,000 workers walked out of the American Woolen Company. Now, most of the workers were immigrant women, and they made $8.76 a week. And their wages were cut by 32 cents, and that was a big cut for them. And they walked out of the factory and went on strike from January to March of 1912. Now, I just want to say a little bit about Bread and Roses. Why did they call it Bread and Roses? Well, these women, they wanted bread, they wanted more money, of course, but they also wanted respect. And that's what the roses were all about. This strike was settled when they got a raise from 5 to 11%. This was a major victory.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Joe Hill said he felt that the Wobblies needed to attract more women into the union. He said,
Women are more exploited than men. The IWW has sadly neglected women and has created a kind of one-legged freakish animal of a union.
He felt that female organizers like Elizabeth Early Flynn should focus exclusively on trying to attract more women into the union.
Mm-hmm.
So here we go with the Rebel Girl.
There are women of many descriptions in this cruel world, as everyone knows. Some are living in beautiful mansions and wearing the finest of clothes. There are blue-blooded queens and princesses who have charms made of diamonds and pearls. But the only and thoroughbred lady is the rebel girl. She's the rebel girl to the working class. She's a shining pearl from Maine to Tennessee. She's fighting for you and for me. She's right there by your side with courage and pride. She's unequal in this world, and I'm proud to fight for freedom with the rebel girl. Yes, her hands may be hardened by labor, and her dress may not be so fine, but the heart in her bosom is beating. That is true to her class and her kind. And bosses in terror are trembling as her spite and defiance she'll hurl. And the only and thoroughbred lady is the rebel girl. She's the rebel girl to the working class. She's a shining pearl from Maine to Tennessee. She's fighting for you and for me. She's right there by your side with courage and pride. She's unequal in this world, and I'm proud to fight for freedom with the rebel girl. Yes, I am proud to fight for freedom with the rebel girl. In January of 1914, Joe Hill was falsely accused of murdering two men in a Salt Lake City grocery store. He was put on trial using the flimsiest evidence, while evidence that clearly pointed to his innocence was ignored by the court. On June 27th, Joe Hill was convicted of first-degree murder, and on July 8th, he was sentenced to death. He was given a choice, hanging or shooting. And Joe said, "I'll take shooting. I've been shot a few times, so I guess I can stand it again." In a display of dark humor, Joe Hill's last telegram to Big Bill Haywood on November 18, 1915 read, "It is 100 miles from here to Wyoming, Could you arrange to have my body hauled to the state line to be buried? Don't want to be found dead in Utah. Joe Hill was 36 years old when his execution took place in the early morning hours of November 19, 1915 in Salt Lake City. Despite appeals and objections from the Swedish ambassador, Helen Keller, AFL President Samuel Gompers, and President Woodrow Wilson, among others. So the industrialists and their sympathizers in government managed to silence one of the most effective and visible voices of the IWW.
So up there on the screen is the Salt Lake City newspaper, the Herald-Republican, the morning that Joe Hill was killed. The headline reads, "Governor turns deaf ear to Wilson's appeal. Hillstrom to be shot to death this morning." There is little doubt today that Joe Hill was killed because he was a foreigner, he was a well-known activist, and he was a member of the industrial workers of the world. The night before he died, he wrote a poem that he called My Last Will. It's a beautiful poem, and the actual manuscript is up there on the screen. We are going to sing those words to you right now, and this music was written by John McCutcheon. So this is Joe Hill's Last Will.
For there is nothing to divide. My kin don't need to fuss and moan. Moss does not cling to a rolling stone. My body, if I could choose, I would to ashes it reduce. Then let the merry breezes blow my dust to where some flowers grow. Some fading flower then would come to life and bloom again. This is my last and final will. Good luck to all of you, Joe Hill.
So 30,000 people attended Joe Hill's funeral on November the 25th, 1915. It was one of the largest funerals ever held in the city of Chicago. Up on the stage where Joe Hill's coffin rested, there were flowers from around the country and the world with inscriptions in Swedish, Russian, Hungarian, Polish, Italian, German, Yiddish, Lithuanian, and English. Up on the stage was a huge banner that read, "In Memoriam, Joe Hill, we never forget, murdered by the authorities of the state of Utah, November the 19th, 1915. Joe Hill was cremated according to his wishes, and 1 year later, 600 packets of his ashes were given to 150 IWW delegates from North and South America, Europe, Asia, and Australia. His ashes were scattered over 5 continents and 47 of the 48 states.
All except Utah. This is an illustration that showed up in an Australian IWW publication. And across the top of the picture is a Joe Hill verse which reads, "Workers of the world awaken. Rise in all your splendid might. Take the wealth that you are making. It belongs to you by right." And the illustration is a drawing of the ghost of Joe Hill addressing the capitalists and the government agencies that had him killed. And it reads, a quote by the ghost of Joe Hill, "The murder of my body avails you nothing. You cannot murder ideas." By summer of 1917, the United States had entered into World War I, where 10 million would die on the battlefield and another 20 million would die of hunger and disease related to the war. That's a total of 30 million people dead from World War I. And to put that into perspective, that is approximately the present-day population of Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, and North Carolina combined.
And another parallel to what is going on today was the 1918 pandemic. And this picture on the screen looks like it's an airplane hangar that has been converted into a makeshift hospital for soldiers at Fort Riley, Kansas. Now, this Spanish flu pandemic infected 500 million people and had a death toll of from 17 to 50 million people. It was one of the deadliest pandemics in human history. And unlike what's going on today, it hit younger people more than older people, and it was undoubtedly picked up and carried by soldiers who were in the trenches together in World War I and then went back to their respective countries and spread this pandemic.
Because the IWW was militantly anti-war, they were considered an enemy of the state. In 1917, laws in various states criminalized the union, declaring that their strike activities were detrimental to wartime production. William H. King, the junior senator from Utah, brought to the Senate a bill designed to, quote, punish them for their efforts to paralyze the arm of government and prevent it from prosecuting the war. President Wilson authorized the War Department to use federal troops as strikebreakers and urged the Justice Department to prosecute the Union as quickly as possible. And there's an illustration of one of the tactics that they used. The goal, largely achieved, was to put the Union out of business.
However, the memory of the IWW lives on. Its heyday really was only 12 years from 1905 to 1917. However, it planted seeds and created tactics that have been used in many struggles for civil and economic rights. In particular, the civil rights movement filled up jails with people who were protesting, and then they sang all the time, just like the Wobblies did.
Mm-hmm. The CIO, the Congress of Industrial Organizations, like the Wobblies, used industry-wide organizing, rank-and-file activism, and direct action, strikes, enabling mass production workers to conquer large industries such as the automobile industry. The United Auto Workers in 1936 used a wobbly tactic, namely the sit-down strike. The first sit-down strike was conducted in 1906 in Schenectady, New York, by the industrial workers of the world.
And this is one of my favorite pictures because it's a sit-down strike orchestra with its banjo, its fiddle, and its guitar playing music on the factory floor. And here's another sit-down strike that is not as well known, but it's one of my favorites. This was the Woolworth sit-down strike by the women who worked there in Detroit in 1937, and they were on strike to get the 40-hour week. Now, the IWW was very advanced when it came to women's rights and black rights. They were anti-authoritarian. They were not a hierarchical union. They were the most creative union ever. They personified art and activism. They had many poets, cartoonists, journalists, and songwriters. Now, Dr. Larry Isaacs, who's the chair of the sociology department at Vanderbilt University, has this to say: contemporary movements could learn a good deal about mobilizing, organizing, and inspiring by studying the art forms that the Wobblies produced.
I Dreamed I Saw Joe Hill was written as a poem in 1930 by Alfred Hayes and turned into a song in 1936 by Earl Robinson. It has been sung and recorded by Paul Robeson, Pete Seeger, Bruce Springsteen. Nell and I have got a version out on our Joe Hill Roadshow CD, and of course, most famously, as Nell mentioned before, Joan Baez sang this song at the Woodstock Festival in 1969. So we are going to go on and play our version of the song, and the chorus is up on the screen. We invite you to sing along on it. It comes once in the beginning, once in the middle, and twice at the end, and we're just going to get right into it. I dreamed I saw
So, in the 1950s and 60s, when the IWW was no longer a real power in the workplace, it remained a strong revolutionary moral presence and inspiration and a symbol of working class dissidence, revolt, and creativity. Every movement motivated by the desire for freedom, equality, and radical social change is a direct descendant of the industrial workers of the world. And they're up there on the screen is a famous quote from the Vietnam War era by Muhammad Ali when he refused to go fight in that war.
Mm-hmm. Now this is a woodblock poster that came out after Joe Hill was killed. And it contains a Joe Hill verse which reads, "If workers take a notion, they can stop all speeding trains. Every ship upon the ocean, they can tie with mighty chains. Every wheel in the creation, every mine and every mill, fleets and armies of the nation will, at their command, stand still." And Joe Hill famously said before he was killed, "Don't mourn, organize."
Okay.
Ralph Chaplin was an IWW journalist, poet, and songwriter. He wrote a song which has been called the anthem of the American labor movement, Solidarity Forever. And we're going to end our program with a version of Solidarity Forever. We will do 3 verses and 3 choruses and repeat the chorus at the end. And Nell would like to say a few words about this.
Yes, typically when we do this song, we do it in an auditorium full of people. And so we do it the way that is traditionally done in the labor movement, which is we ask everybody to stand up, hold hands, and sing Solidarity. And obviously we can't do that tonight. So we're going to ask you to sing along with us, and we'll do a virtual handhold as we sing the song. Now we're going to put the verses up there on the screen. Please join us in the verses. They're really powerful. And let us go ahead and start out with the verses. They go like this.
When the union's inspiration through the workers' blood shall run, there can be no power greater anywhere beneath the sun. What force on earth is weaker than the feeble strength of one? But the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. They have taken untold millions that they never toiled to earn. But without our brain and muscle, not a single wheel can turn. We can break their hardy power, gain our freedom when we learn that the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. In our hands is placed a power greater than their hoarded gold, greater than the might of armies multiplied 1,000-fold. We can bring to earth a new world from the ashes of the old, for the union makes us strong. Here we go. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. Solidarity forever. For the union makes us strong. Yeah.
Okay, that was great. That's always a fun song for us to sing. So, up there on the screen is our CD, the Joe Hill Roadshow CD. If you are interested in getting a copy of it, a lot of the songs we sang tonight are on there. Please contact us at our website, which is www.shelbysong.com. And we also want to remind you that we do have a PayPal button listed here, so if you feel like throwing us a few bucks to support this project, we would really appreciate that. And now we want to acknowledge the sponsors of this show, without whom it would not have been possible for us to do this show. So they are
The Tennessee Arts Commission,
the Metro Nashville Arts Commission,
the Dark Horse Theater, at which we were originally scheduled to do this show, and they graciously sponsored us in doing it.
Tennessee Alliance for Progress. The Joe Hill Show is part of TAP's Art and Activism Project.
Mayworks, a group out of Winnipeg, Canada, which is another labor and arts organization.
Tennessee AFL-CIO.
The Eugene V. Debs Foundation, the Eugene V. Debs Foundation. And a little side note, we were invited to play there about 1.5 years ago for one of their annual banquets, and it was quite an honor.
The Utility Workers Union of America Local 121, and we want to do a special shout out to our good friend Mark Brooks, who works for that union, who's been a loyal fan and supporter of us for a long time.
The IWW Hungarian Literature Fund.
And they are famous for organizing the 100th centenary celebration of Joe Hill's life, and they also put out a terrific labor history calendar, so we recommend that you check them out.
Look them up, yes.
Yes.
IWW Hungarian Literature
Fund. So with that, folks, we're going to say good night, and thank you so much for tuning in to us, and we have really enjoyed the opportunity to do this show for you.
Absolutely. And I will just end by saying, as Edward R. Murrow used to say to end his newscast, good night and good luck.